superstars. I'm so honored to have them here today at Life Pacific. You have a story connection with Life Pacific, all of you do, but to me personally, I just am so, and I'm so excited you're here. At Cedar Crest, I saw you, I'm like, I gotta get him on campus. So what I wanna do is go down the road, just say who you are, where you serve, and where your area of ministry is right now. So, yep.
My name is Matt, and this is my beautiful bride, Sarah, and we are down in San Diego, North County, at a church called the Father's House, and currently we oversee junior high and high school.
Just kidding.
No,
He introduced us.
No.
My name's Sarah. This is my husband, Matt. We oversee junior high and high school and many other things, but that is our passion, is Next Gen and junior high and high school, and we love them.
My name is Brittany Johnstone, and I get to serve the Pacific Southwest District as the Next Gen representative.
My name is Seth McKenna. I'm the Next Gen pastor at the Bridge Church in El Segundo.
Cool. I'm JJ. I'm at Freedom Church in Chatsworth, California, with Pastor Justice and Maria Coleman. Great, incredible leaders. I am the generations pastor there. So.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alexander James. I'm the young adult pastor at Light and Life in Long Beach. I've been a full-time spoken word poet for the last, almost 5 years. Just traveling and doing youth conferences and camps. So, yeah.
So good. We're so blessed. Okay, so first question is, and you know what? No pauses. Okay, jump in. We aren't polite around here. Okay, so what shifts? I want to ask you guys, what shifts have you noticed from millennial to Gen Z? What shifts have you noticed?
I think the biggest shift that I've noticed is millennials had a generational culture or value of connectivity. It's where we saw social media blow up. That was like my junior year of high school when I got Instagram for the first time, and when Snapchat was released. And so you're telling me, oh, there's a way I can be with my friends all the time? Like, let's go. But with Gen Zers, their generational value is privacy. And to see that, it's so difficult for me to connect with kids online today because all of their platforms that they value are all the ones that are untracked or untraced.
That's so good. That's so right on.
I would add to that is the isolation piece. I think that we've noticed with a lot of our students is that they are very isolated, but once you begin the conversation, you begin to realize that there's a massive identity crisis that is going in. And I know that's a lot of generations, but especially with Gen Z, there's this identity crisis of them just not knowing who they are, which then keeps them isolated. It doesn't allow them to come open. It keeps them isolated where they're currently at.
We just took a bunch of students to camp. And, I remember going to camp, and the craziest part of going to camp was actually the bus ride. A lot of crazy things would happen on the bus ride. It was loud. People were throwing things. If you thought a girl was cute, that was the time to pass a note or tell your friend to talk to her for you. And we were in the bus, on a bus 2.5 weeks ago, and it was oddly quiet. And I turned around, and students were sharing AirPods. Those are headphones without cords. And I was like, why aren't you guys talking? And they're like, oh yeah, we're in a group chat. I'm like, you're sitting next to each other. What do you mean? And they're like, we just don't want anybody to hear what we're talking about. And I'm like, and it was just, it was weird. I kept looking back, like, are my students alive? And it was just quiet. It was the weirdest thing ever.
I think from the other aspect of planning camps and big events for kids, it's harder to keep them engaged, and it's harder to grab their attention. And we just did this video thing at our winter camps, and I thought it was the coolest thing, and they weren't that impressed. And I was like, oh, I was really offended.
You are not
I'm
cool
not cool
anymore.
I don't know. Yeah, they came like all SMH, shake my head. I didn't know what that was. Like,
oh my God,
they're
it's
just
time to get
yeah, no, but they're harder to get engaged. It's so much harder, and I don't feel cool, and I feel like I'm in my 20s. I'm okay to be cool still, but I'm not. So.
I think another thing we have to notice is that our generation was like, how many Facebook friends do you have? How many followers do you have? And we kind of graded our value system as far as our placement in the world by the amount of people we've amassed that signify that they like us, that they're our friend. Like, I have 4,000 friends, which is like completely unrealistic. But that was like this measuring stick that we used. However, this generation is coming up, they don't care about the numbers, they don't care about the millions of followers. They'd rather have 3 deep relationships with people who are like figuring out themselves, and I'll take 3 deep friends over 3,000 Facebook, imaginary friends. So I think what we sometimes look at is like this solitary kind of aloneness is really like, no, I want one person and be super deep with this one person and dig everything out. And that process just looks like they're backing up, but I think they just don't value like the little fake, God bless you, brother, how you doing, sister? Like the image, they've forsaken the image and like, no, I'd rather have something deep and real. And I think that's challenging for us because a lot of us have perfected how to church. And now it's like, oh, but who are you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? And they care way more about the Monday, Tuesday than the song you sing on Sunday. And that's a struggle for us because we've gotten really, really, really good at church.
I would add to that too, because I think you are really cool, by the way. I'm 30 and I'm still figuring out how to be cool. Social media, I feel like today is not what it used to be, and we use social media as a tool for these kids, and that's not what they're using anymore. I feel like isolation is really what they're pulling back from social media. They're saying, well, I don't even know who my identity is, and I don't even really think they engage on social media anyways as much as, I guess I'm technically a millennial, even though I fight that, but I'm a millennial. And I think social media we used to use as or videos or whatever, it may be a really cool tool, but they don't use that anymore. It's one-on-ones. You have to really grab them one-on-one and say, okay, how are you feeling? And why do you feel this way? And that's what connects them more than social media or some big flat. I mean, for us, it's also attendance. Getting them to want to be at youth group is important too, because they want to sit at home and feel depressed and feel isolated and feel like, well, no one's calling me or no one's texting me and I'm just at home. Or they have those couple friends that they want to go hang out with because they understand them. And I think getting them to come to something is important, and it takes a one-on-one personal relationship.
That's good.
Yeah, with that, I go to the high school, our local high school, every single week because I oversee the Fellowship of Christian Athletes Club there. And I'm constantly engaging with students and talking with them. And the number one question that I get in response when I invite a kid to come to our youth ministry is, well, who's there? Who goes there? Because they don't want to show up to a place where they're not already going to be known and feel comfortable walking into the room, because God forbid you walk in and have to have a conversation with a stranger. That's going to be a little bit too much for me, and my anxiety level is going to go through the roof. And so let's just do me a favor, and I'm going to hang out with my 2 friends, and you know what? It's totally fine. I can kick back on a Wednesday night and play Xbox all night long and just feel as fulfilled and satisfied as if I went and was in a room full of people. And so ultimately for them, I think the essence of being in a room full of people and still feeling lonely is very real. And so because of that, in-person interaction, it's not worth it anymore, because they were born already into connectivity via online. And so why strive for something that I already have, even though they don't know or realize that it's not real, that it's surface level. And so I think that for us as ministry leaders, and for you as parents and ministry leaders, the big push is once again putting on the platform that in-person, real-life connections is where value comes from, that there's a depth there that God has ordained us to be communicators to, and that social media is not bad, it's not wrong, but finding identity from it or finding belief systems from it is never going to be sufficient. It's always going to be surface level.
Yeah, I also want to add this real quick just to kind of sum it up. I think another thing that's challenging for us that we have to accept is that our discipleship model doesn't work anymore. Yep. Like, so the idea of I'll just get you all in the room, and because I've made the triangle and put God, you, Jesus, like that's the discipleship model we've been given, and it doesn't work anymore. Like the big group discipleship, that's just teaching now. Discipleship has to be, did you come to my game? Did you ask me how I was doing? Yep. Did you remember my mom's name? And it's challenging for us because that's not the muscle we grew. We grew, the mindset we had was event-based discipleship. We'll have an event, kids will come, God will do a thing. Right. Like, and now it's like, and they're like, hey, the world has better events than you. What else do you have? So we have to offer them authentic relationship and connection, and they need to know that you could be somewhere else, but you chose to be with them. And we have to change the way we think about what discipleship is. Some churches have big budgets for events but haven't done any discipleship because they're not sacrificing time and energy to love on a kid personally, one-to-one, like Woman at the Well type stuff.
I think you hit it on the head there. I remember being a student in a youth ministry and having my youth pastor take me out to coffee. And I was like, yes, our millennials love coffee shops because you meet people, you can talk to one another. I remember 8 years ago, telling a student, hey, do you want to go to coffee? And they'd go crazy about it. Do you remember when everybody used to give out Starbucks gift cards at youth? That was the thing. Well, now I'm like, hey, let's go out to lunch. And a student will respond by saying, well, why don't you meet me online and we can play Fortnite? And I'm realizing I hate video games, but I've had to learn to like video games in order to have some connection with students. Oh, are you logging in today? Hey, I'm about to log in. Let's play. I've got a headset. I mean, come on, I've got a headset. I'm 30 years old. I hate video games. But that is sometimes the tools necessary or the tools that are out there that I need to use in order to connect with a student. I'll see them at church, and now we have a completely different relationship simply because we connected online over a video game. That's mind-blowing.
They care more about you coming to meet them where they are at rather than giving them a system, a program, or a service for them to come and meet you where you're at. And the picture that I saw with this is, oh my gosh, we are in a day and age where the church is now having to actually be like Jesus and go and meet people where they're at.
Oh my God, Mike. That is so true. Listen, what I'm hearing, are you guys hearing this? The game has changed, and we got to get on board. Because we're irrelevant already. We got to get on board if we want to reach this next generation for Christ. And I think for parents, this also hits to the heart of the way we parent. What's happening here is these leaders are getting students that have been raised by Gen X, some boomers, and even some millennials. And the association of the Psychological Association says that no child below the age of 3 should have a screen of any kind. Dr. Jean Twenge from the University of San Diego, she's an expert on millennials and Gen Z, she said that she doesn't even see why a student would need a phone, even in elementary school and junior high. And that's the thing. But my kids, 3rd grade, everyone had the best iPhone. And that is again, this is the Wild West. No one has known, there's no regulations. And now research is coming out, the impact of social media, the impact of the phone. And now we're like, oh my gosh, what do we do with this generation? So I want to ask, to that point, I want to ask, what are you guys doing in your youth groups, in your churches, in your homes, to begin to, again, you're in a church context. How do you handle phones in your youth group? At camp, what are you doing? And what's working, what isn't? Who wants to go?
I'll go first just because it's a scary question. What I've seen that works really, really well, I believe, is the mentality. So there's one thing to say, you can't have your phones here because we're talking to Jesus, right? Which is like, put the phone in the basket, but then we're going to go meet Jesus. And to us, we are removing distractions. To them, I can't bring my full self to Jesus. Jesus only wants me if I leave my phone behind. And I think that there's a way to create space where what they see and what they're experiencing is more valuable, right, than what they're experiencing on their phone. So I think it's not just about the security guard taking the phone. I think the onus is on us to go, is my content worth their attention? And I think we have to go maybe the superhero Jesus summer vacation Bible school lesson is probably not what we should do anymore. So I would push back and say we need to really, really be honest about the content we're bringing kids, like the space and the community and the culture you're creating, and create a culture that is more valuable than what they have on their phone, and then they'll in and of themselves choose those connections. But when you create this bullet point that you have to touch before you can get in, then to them, I can't bring my full self. I'm not really accepted.
I'll add something. What we've been doing recently in our youth group is if we speak or if we're teaching on something, we bring the value of having their Bible in the physical form and having a notepad to take notes, because I think if they have their phone accessible, just like adults, I know in the morning I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I'm just reading a different version on my phone. Well, then what else is on your phone? Facebook, we still use Facebook, Instagram, all these other things that notify you when things come up. And so we're trying to teach them, you don't need your phone to have your Bible. It's really important to have your physical Bible to open up and read the living word and not just have your phone. So yes, some kids have phones in church and we don't take them or remove them. But we do have a stack of Bibles that we pass out, and we have a stack of note paper that we pass out. We're going back to the 2000 when that used to be really common. The 90s, where it's like the physical thing is so important versus just having it on your phone, because your phone is another distraction.
Yeah, it's been hard making that adjustment, not gonna lie. I grew up pretty old-fashioned in the sense of when you go to camp, you leave your phone and your iPod at home. That was me. iPods came out when I was in 6th grade, and I had T9 on my cell phone, my first phone. That's what I had. Everybody in here is like, what's that? You had to push 4 buttons to give an S. That's what it was. Here's what happened. So I've been youth pastoring now 3 years. We just took our kids up to camp. And I had a really, really struggled time coming into this realization of I can't enforce the no phones at camp policy anymore like it was enforced for me. Because telling a kid that you can't bring your phone is like telling them to cut their hand off. And so instead, I was like, what if we just change our approach with it and we have a conversation with the kids? Hey, you want to be treated as an adult? Great, we're going to do that. Here's the deal. I'm going to trust you. You're allowed to bring your phone. But I'm going to trust you that you're going to only be on it when it's appropriate, and that you're going to have this self-discipline to be able to resist your urges when it's not appropriate. And honestly, it actually worked out in our favor. But in terms of discipleship, to your question, here's what I realized. I can't disciple 40 students personally. I got honestly about 5 in me that I can do really, really, really well. And so that's what I'm doing right now. But then it's on me as a leader to make sure that I'm discipling my leaders so that they're going to go and disciple students as well. And so if you're a church leader in here, the essence of your ministry is to invest all of your time and energy into your leaders, your volunteers, and then you go and spend the rest of your time and energy with about the other 5 people that you feel like the Lord's put on your heart. And you do that to everything that you have, because this idea of discipling 40 or 50 or 100 people, it's just not realistic. But kids today they desperately need one-on-one relationships, connections. And I'm telling you right now, I'm seeing it where right now my seniors in high school that I'm discipling, I got 5 or 6 of them. One of them is actually here, he's our intern. And the growth that has taken place just by hanging out with them, inviting them to come over to the church or to your house or whatever, unreal to see the growth that takes place in them.
Okay, real quick. So you bring up so many good points. And what Seth is saying, if he were to ban phones, and I know people still do today in youth groups and all that, and that's still something that is being navigated. But what we are seeing an emotional and psychological breakdown when a phone is removed. So when a phone is removed, because this has become an addiction, because every time you swipe, and you look for likes, and then you get your hit, dopamine is released in the brain, which is like crack cocaine. And it relieves, and it gives joy, and it gives love and bonding. And then when you dip, which you will dip, right? Students dip. You go back for the hit. And so what your brain is doing is learning how to be addicted to this and this. So this becomes your stress relief. This becomes your comfort. This becomes anger management. This becomes your relationship. This becomes your counselor. So when you take this away, they are having a physical response as if they are withdrawing. So anxiety is going to go up, heart rate's going to go up, they're going to sweat, some even panic. So we're dealing with a mental health crisis facing this generation like never before. This isn't, this is like a normal generation. No, this is different. So I want to know how your church, or you as parent, do we have any parents here? How you dealing? Parents out here, they want to know, how are you dealing with the mental health crisis of this generation in your context? And it's very much related to technology. So let's talk about that. Alexander, do you want to start?
Yes, I'll start. I think that The first thing is like humility. Like acknowledge, I think Seth said put it great, like what worked for you won't work for them, and like lovingly trust God to help you accept that. Because taking the phone, all those things happen to them, and then you want them to go hear from Jesus. You know, you're not even creating the space for that to even happen. So I think the first thing is humility and doing your best to meet them where they are. I think we have to become radically compassionate, and to the point where our compassion not just makes us, stay on our roles and serve, but our compassion drives us to, I need to bend however I need to bend. I will reach whatever I need to reach. I will sacrifice whatever I need to sacrifice to meet you and create the space for us to have real relationship. Because I think that we see a Jesus who finds the lame man and says, what do you need? And I love that. He says, what will thou have me do with you? He's like, of course, you're the mindset of, I want to walk. That makes sense. But he said, no, what do you identify as your need? And I think one thing that we can do way more of is stop prescribing our kids in our heads and look them in the face and say, hey, what do you need? And just do our best to meet their personal needs. And if there is a deeper psychological thing, then you find an expert, or you connect them to a mentor, you connect them to a space. But that first vine they swing from is somebody who's willing to reach and say, hey, you as an individual, not a number in my youth group, what do you in it of yourself need? And I'll do my best to serve that need and get them out of the product machine of going through your church. And I'm just trying to make leaders, and I'm just trying to make praise and worshipers, and I'm just trying to make, no, let them be a person first and meet the need.
When it comes to how I need to focus on getting these types of resources to our leaders in our churches, it goes back to letting them be heard and letting them feel like you do care. Because I think there's a lot of times, I think even for myself, where I go, oh my gosh, this is so different than my friends. I had one friend out of my whole high school who struggled crazy with anxiety. And now it's you have these kids where it comes in and there's all sorts of things. I mean, our nurse has so many meds at camp because of the things that these kids are being prescribed for. And so for us, it's, we're not afraid anymore to say certain things from the platform that I think that for my generation, people were afraid to say because you don't want to offend. Because these kids, I mean, I'm so naive to think that the junior hires have no idea what certain words are. And so for us, we're trying to bridge that thing of not being afraid and addressing it. And then also, we also have to be careful to not give opinion, I think, from the stage as in a bigger arena, not in our youth groups. We encourage youth one-on-one time to be able to speak freely of what the Lord or the Word has said. But from the platform, we have to be careful to not offend them, because I think that they are, like you said earlier, you tell them one thing, they're easily offended by that because they think that we're not loving. We opened up an area where we're having leaders that we have now even opened up a text line that they can text us personal questions that we may not answer from the stage that they would like. Or we have certain leaders that they can email, or if they choose to meet one-on-one with at camp, we've allowed them to do that as well, so that they can get those answers if they're not feeling like they're getting them from the platform, which is, I think, what they're looking for. But it's we still have to be really careful, because senior pastors don't always like if you say certain things. But so those are certain things that we're trying to do from up front to release into the churches. And I lead a young adults group at my local church, and so again, it's building that relationship, because I've found that now that the Gen Z is opening up, there's more millennials opening up. And so for us, again, it's providing that that safe place, I think, is where we're coming from.
I think the landscape of student ministry has changed so much in the last 10 years. Even with what we define as a crisis. I remember 10 years ago, everybody's got, if you've been in youth ministry long enough, you've got the phone call of a student in a crisis, and you meet up with them, or, hey, what's going on? Oh, my boyfriend or my girlfriend broke up with me. And that was probably the case 10 years ago. That's what we considered a crisis. Or my friend was talking behind my back, and now we haven't spoke for the last week and a half. And just last night, I'm kind of in this interesting thing where on Thursday nights, it's kind of our Gen night from 6 to 7:30. I preach to our middle school and high schoolers. Then I go into our young adult service. And it's crazy how drastically different both are. Young adults is definitely more comfortable for me because I understand them, right? I approached a high school student. I think he's an 8th grader yesterday. He looked kind of down. And it goes back to what is a crisis. 10 years ago, a crisis would have been somebody breaking up or a fallout with a friend. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And the student looks at me and he goes, I've had a terrible week. And I said, well, what's happening? And he had nothing to do with like friendships or relationships at school, but everything to do with the fact that he got a new therapist that week. He says, I've got a new therapist and I really liked my old one, but my old therapist is transferred and is going somewhere else, and I just got this new one, and I don't know how to handle what's going on in my life, and now I've got this new person trying to talk to me about my problems, and I don't really like her. I just want my old therapist back. And I'm standing there looking at a 13-year-old say this to me, breaking down. Wow. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. And whenever, it's funny because I preach at 6, and then I'll preach again at 8. And I never know how I do when I'm done preaching to middle schoolers or high schoolers. Like, I don't know if it was the best sermon I've ever preached or if it was the worst sermon I've ever preached, because no one ever tells me anything. What I will hear from them is, hey, thank you for taking time to talk to me after service. Yep. Hey, thank you for taking the time to hear what is going on in my life. That's what I hear, where I hear feedback. I go preach at young adults and it's like the greatest thing ever. I get off stage, oh my gosh, that was incredible. You killed it. God spoke to me. I'm like, come on, let's go. But with Generation Z, it's completely different. The value isn't even fully in what I communicate from a stage, but it's more so in how involved I am in their life one-on-one. And that's...
Yeah.
So good.
So good. Because I have like so many thoughts in my head right now because my brain's like, do all these things I want to say. But to go with that, I feel like we can speak something, but some of our most profound times in ministry is when we have prayer and prophetic time. And kids are allowed to come and talk to a leader one-on-one and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. Will you listen? Will you pray over me? Will you speak life over me? And that is so powerful. Even this last week, I had 2 students that have anxiety and depression, right? Because those are the 2 things that we're dealing with a lot, is anxiety and depression. And I remember Angie telling me, she said, anxiety is usually when you're focusing too much on the future, and depression is when you're focusing too much on the past. So that really helped me with my mindset when I'm like, okay, she's saying anxiety or he's saying depression. And as leaders and pastors and parents, I think the 2 things that I would say is to be available and to be non-judgmental, because kids need you to listen more than anything. And then I had a student call me last night and she said, I just need to talk to you. I told my mom that I really needed to talk to you, and she said I had to do the dishes. And I'm like, well, how did that make you feel? And she's like, well, I was pissed off. But then I got to call you after I did the dishes. But she said she needed me to just listen. And I said, so why didn't you talk to your mom? Because you and your mom have a really great relationship. And she said, I'm afraid of what she's going to say. Or how she's going to think of me when I bring this up, because she used to be self-harm, and she used to be suicidal. And she said, my mom thinks that it was a one-time fix when it's something that I'm still dealing with. And this is something we're in conversation with the parents and with her. So it's not just me and her, and I'm not telling anyone. But I think what she's looking for is someone to listen, someone to not judge her for these thoughts that she's having, and someone to be like, I care about you, so we're meeting every Monday because I'm like, I want you to know that I see you and I love you and you are seen and loved and God has a plan for you. And that comes in after we build the trust, right, is the biblical truths and the things that I want to speak over her. But I think availability is so important, that we have to be available to listen and to then encourage.
Sarah, that is so on point. Actually, it's going back to basics. It is being Jesus, it's being present, it's calling it out in a loving way, it's saying, I see you, in spite of everything, I see you. Now listen, there is hope. I don't want this to depress you, because honestly, if we can garner the support of our senior leaders, that's something I want to process in our groups, is what support do you have? Because bottom line is we need to be educated. How many of you feel more like aware now after this information? Anything new information today? Okay, we have got to get this message to the masses. So we need to be educated. You guys need to be doing seminars, parent sessions to get this information out there. Education is number 1, because we cannot just deal with symptoms all day. We got to get to the root, and it happens in the home. It happens with the parents. We got to get to the root. Then we need to know how to deal with the root issues of our students. Get to the heart. And Alexander, you said it. What do you need? Sarah, you're like, what do you need me to do? How can I listen to you? You guys are all so present with your students. So presence is important. Bringing them with you. You know what? Don't let them be bored. Say, come on, let's go do this. Let's go do this thing. Let me empower you. Here, be in charge of this. Empower them. So there are ways to mobilize this generation.